Hi, and welcome to the My Dog Made Me Do It Naturally podcast. I am your host, Kat Jepson, a canine nutritionist with an innate obsession with dogs and the natural ways in which we are driven to live because of them. So, let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the My Dog Made Me Do It Naturally podcast. I am your host, Kat Jepson, and today I am joined by Simmone, who is the loving mother to Blue, the GSD. And today we've got quite a heavy topic, which I think is not talked about enough in the pet world, although it should be. And we are going to talk about how losing Cesca, Blue's big sister, impacted her feeding habits and overall well-being. So welcome, Simmone. Welcome to the show. How are you this evening?
Thank you for having me. I'm okay. I'm a little bit nervous. I've never done anything like this before. But I'm sure we'll be fine.
You will. You will forget all about the podcast by the time we get talking. I promise you that.
Good.
Right. So I think just to kind of set the scene a little bit, why don't you tell us a little bit about Blue and Cesca to start with?
Yeah, so Cesca she wasn't my first dog. I had a dog in my childhood, but she was the first dog that I owned. So we brought her home. I think I was 22 when we got her, and my husband was 20. So we were babies, and we brought home this small horse. But Cesca was a German Shepherd. Looking back at sort of where we got Cesca from at the time, we were probably young and naive, and she probably was from a little bit of a puppy farm. But she was great. So she passed away last February. She was 12. We very quickly found out with Cesca, I think she was about 9 months old, that she'd got hip dysplasia. And I know. And then when she was about 5, she'd walk and we'd hear like a click. So she went for more x-rays, and then they found that she'd also got it in one of her elbows on her front legs. So she not a problem dog, because she was amazing, but there was always something with Cesca. It felt like we were always back and forth from the vets. So when we decided to get another dog, we wanted to make sure that we did all the research that our little 20-year-old selves never did. And we got Blue. We have a saying in our house that Cesca was sent from the heavens and Blue was sent to test every ounce of our being. She was
sent from the other place.
She was, yeah. She is sassy and fierce and really, really quite quickly slotted into that annoying little sister role. And we thought Cesca was big. Blue is, I'm not sure whether we brought a dog or a pony. She's massive.
Is she really that much bigger?
Yeah, so she's quite a lot longer than Cesca ever was. And she doesn't look it. She looks really slender, but she's 43 kilos. So she's a pony.
Yeah, wow. She's a big girl, isn't she?
Yeah, she is. And Blue, bless her, has been pretty much golden from the minute we got her. We've had a few issues with anxiety and odd bits and bobs, but in terms of her health, not really a massive amount of issues that we experience with Cesca. So they are a little bit like chalk and cheese. But very quickly we realised that we would never be more than a 2-dog household. It was chaos from day one, literally day one. I remember we brought her home, and we had Cesca in the garden, and we took Blue out. It was the summer after lockdown as well, so it was hot. And within probably 10 seconds of meeting Cesca, Blue was hanging off her tail. Cesca couldn't go anywhere without this little fur ball just hanging off the tip of her tail. And I remember speaking to the vets when we took Blue for injections. You know, she won't leave Cesca alone. What can we do? She said, pop some lemon juice on Cesca's tail. She'll hate it. She'll never do it again. But it turned out Blue quite liked lemon juice, and it just encouraged the behaviour. So they had they loved each other, but Blue taught Cesca patience, definitely taught Cesca some patience.
Oh, bless her.
No.
Oh, that's lovely. And I think, It's not always easy when you bring a second dog in when you've already got a resident dog living there. I mean, we got Betty and Boris together, and then Barney came 2 years later. Barney came like the summer before Betty passed, so we had a 3-dog household for a little bit. And I remember getting Betty and Boris, and they were like, I was also a young newbie and didn't really do any research, and I didn't even really do any research about potty training or anything like that. And I remember there just being like piles of poo all over the house, and I didn't know which dog had done it, and I was just like, oh my god, I've got 2 dogs and they're just pooing everywhere. But when we got Barney, obviously I did a bit more research, although I do, didn't research like the breeders and things. That didn't come until afterwards. But I did kind of step it up in terms of like the potty training and things. But again, Barney is completely different. Like Barney and Boris couldn't be any more different, like the same. So maybe it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just one of those things.
I think Cesca was 9 as well when we brought Blue home. So it was very much, Blue's either going to give her this new lease of life, or Cesca is going to hate every minute of her life. And she tried her best to be the patient big sister. She really did. But Blue is, she is sent to test everybody that meets her. I'm sure of it.
But I mean, even so, you did do a good job though, because I mean, she lived until 12, which is, that's a really good age for a German Shepherd, especially one that has issues with their joints. So you did a good job there.
Thank you.
No, it's credit where it's due. So what did your natural journey look like for Blue and Cesca?
So with Cesca, again, really naive, and I mean, probably the same as you. My parents probably didn't even know what a raw diet was. So our family dogs grew up on whatever kibble was brought from the supermarket at the time. I don't think there was any thought behind it at all. So Cesca was kind of the same. We brought her home. She'd been weaned onto supermarket kibble, and we didn't know any better. We probably didn't think to introduce Cesca to raw until around about the time we did with Blue, which was quite early with Blue's. Blue came home on a raw diet. But for majority of Cesca's life, very basic kibble, nothing exciting, no bowl boosters for the first 9 years of her life, no fruit, no veg. And we could see that then. I think by the time we'd started to transition her to a more natural, healthier diet when we got Blue, Cesca would turn her nose up at everything. If it wasn't a chicken nugget or like cheese or something that she knew she shouldn't have, she was not interested. We'd give Blue a carrot and Cesca would look at her like, you'll die from eating that. So she was a tricky one. Where with Blue is, she'll eat anything you give her. She's very easy to feed. She loves everything, which we're quite fortunate with.
Yeah, and I think definitely it does, dogs form preferences about their food from being puppies. So if Cesca's known kibble all her life till being 9, which is a long time in dog years, then she's going to be like, hey, don't fix what ain't broken. I like this kibble. Whereas if you say, Blue came home on a raw food diet, that's why she's going to have that hunger for that raw meaty bone. That's like Barney. Barney didn't come home on a raw food diet, but I was into the raw food diet at the time of bringing him home. So I put him straight on a raw food diet, and he did absolutely love it. Like I remember him eating his meals as a puppy, and his belly would just swell up, and he'd just be like this little big pot-bellied pig walking around. But when I tried to get Boris onto it, he was like, nah. I'm not fussy for that. And he still does it now sometimes. He's always been a bit picky with it. There's been times where, he'll just basically pie his food for like 2 to 3 days because he doesn't want that particular protein or something like that. And it's, it can be tricky. But I always say, I shouldn't really say this, but I always say dogs that will eat anything are proper dogs, because you expect a dog to eat absolutely anything, because by nature they are opportunistic scavengers. They like, you know, in the wild they would eat literally anything they could get their mouths around. So I think, you know, it does make it that little bit easier when they are willing to eat. But it still doesn't come without its trials, does it?
Oh, I know. And Blue is easy. I mean, broccoli is probably the one thing that she would turn her nose up at, but as long as it's mushed in her food okay, or it's blended into something, she's fine. We are really lucky with her.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, bless her. So, obviously you have told us, unfortunately, Cesca passed away in February last year.
Yeah.
Bless her soul. Oh, beautiful angel. So, and Blue was 3? Was she 3?
2.
2.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did this impact Blue in the household?
Yeah, so in the run up to losing Cesca, so probably sort of three-ish days before, it was really obvious that Cesca had gone downhill quite quickly. Her breathing had changed, and she wasn't herself. She had no interest in playing or anything like that. So I think Blue picked up on that behaviour and almost became, it's like their roles reversed a little bit. So how Blue would normally come and lay on the rug and Cesca would groom Blue, it sort of changed a little bit. So Cesca was sort of laying down and Blue was hovering around Cesca. So straight away, I think Blue could definitely sense something was going on. And then sadly, when we did lose Cesca, we chose to use a cremation company outside of the vets. We wanted to just have it a little bit more personal than going to the vets, leaving her there and job done. We sort of wanted to do it a little bit more nicely. So Cesca came home after sadly passing to the Rainbow Bridge. We spoke to a couple of behaviourists who recommended, because Blue didn't really know life without Cesca, it would be a definitive way of Blue knowing that Cesca was gone. In hindsight, I wish we hadn't done that. Blue, Blue kind of kept her distance initially when Cesca came home before we went to the pet crematorium, and it wasn't until we sort of moved Cesca to take her that Blue became really protective of her. She almost sat on her to stop us touching and moving her. Aww. And I think that was probably the start of the process then. So we came home. She was very quiet, straight away refused to eat and drink, and that went on for about 3 days. So it was, no matter what we would offer her, she was not interested. So I think at one point my son offered her a chocolate biscuit and she stuck her nose up at that. She was just not having any interest in anything. She wasn't drinking her water. We'd go upstairs and she'd howl because she was afraid that she'd been left on her own. And my husband was working. He wasn't able to get time off. I remember it was a half term. So I was quite fortunate that I was at home for those first few days. But on the Monday when I went back to work, we had our neighbours ringing us to say, she's howling and she's barking and it's, she sounds like she's in pain. So I was thinking, oh God, has she got herself stuck somewhere and come home? And it wasn't. She was just obviously vocalizing everything, how she felt. So food and water wise, that was probably the trickiest part for Blue. So I remember back then we had our little Puppy Chops pet shop brand rep chat. And I remember putting in like, help, I need help. And it was, I think initially it was bone broth. So she was drinking bone broth. I think that was probably about day 3, and that was the first thing that touched her tummy in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
I know. And then it was probably a good 4 or 5 days before we actually got any, I would say, substance of a meal into her. Once she'd had the bone broth, I think we managed to trick her with the odd sprat or rabbit ear.
Oh, yeah.
But it did take a good sort of 4 or 5 days just to get her to even eat a meal, which even then I think it was just like ground off diced beef. It wasn't even her regular diet. It really did take its time.
Oh, bless her. Well, if you think, well, I mean, how you felt about the whole situation, and you have other things in your life to try and take your mind off it. Whereas for the pet that's left behind, that she was probably just so confused about, what the hell is going on. And you just can't seem to imagine what it must be like for them, especially because they can't really communicate. So, I imagine it's really difficult to watch as well as a pet parent.
Yeah, so like I was coming home from work when I was getting those messages, and she was almost sweaty to touch. You could tell that she'd really got herself worked up, and she was losing hair. Like it was like it was shedding season all over again. We'd come in and you couldn't see the floor for all the dog fur. So she really was getting herself super worked up. But I remember coming in one day and she was laying on a bed, and I just sat on the floor and cried with her. And it was very much, I could sit and talk to people and say, it's a horrible day today. I miss her, X, Y, and Z. But Blue was almost communicating those feelings that you try to keep a little bit private. So you wouldn't go to work and cry, but you would come home, and Blue was almost sort of, it was a mirror of how we were feeling, but we couldn't help her because she doesn't speak English. There was nothing we could do. So it was a long process, but we got her there in the end.
So I know it's so difficult, and it's like when I think about losing, when we lost Betty, I mean, Betty and Boris were inseparable. Like they shared bed and everything. Like since being puppies, they always shared a bed, and we always went everywhere together. And Betty was like the boss of the gang. What she said when, even though she was like this long and she weighed like 5 kilos, she was in charge. She was so bossy when I think back. And like, because of everything else that was happening at the time when we lost Betty, I honestly can't even remember like the dogs when, like afterwards, because obviously my dad had passed away and Betty had passed away, and I was just in this horrible mess of just upset and anxiety and just basically, well, you know what it's like. And Boris's seizures started getting worse, which, sometimes I just don't understand why it didn't all make sense to me back then, because obviously he was stressed and he didn't know what was going on, and he was looking for Betty, and it's like, whereas now when I look back at it, I think everything kind of just falls into place when you think about the behaviors. But I honestly cannot tell you, apart from Boris's seizures getting worse and Barney kind of becoming a bit reactive, I can't tell you what their behavior was like in the house. I literally can't remember it all. And, I hate myself for it, because I think I wish I would have tuned in more. No, but this is what we do, isn't it? I think, when we look back.
Yeah.
But I think, it was just one of those things where I was just completely oblivious to it. So, Blue's really lucky that you actually considered her feelings in this, because I think a lot of people probably just think, dogs don't feel grief. I think there's a lot of people that actually they do. And even like when dogs, if their owner passes away, or even when they've been put in a rescue and things like that, it's just so stressful, and then that can lead on to other issues like Barney. We've struggled with Barney and his like temperament and stress and everything ever since then, and it's definitely something to do with that. And then Boris obviously has his epilepsy. But do you think Blue has had any long-lasting issues from that experience, or do you think she's kind of come out of the other end now?
Mostly I would say she's sort of come out the other end. Blue has always had little bits of reactivity, but I think it's been based on fear. So Cesca was really the only dog that Blue knew, where now it's sort of, we've got to the point where she had companionship for the first like 2.5 years of her life to nothing. So it's very much like that lasting effect of actually she's gone from being not completely socialized, but she did have another dog that was in the house. She had companionship. She had that aspect of being social to nothing, and that worries me a little bit. Like, if the time comes that we bring another dog into the house, how is she going to react? How is that going to pan out? How will she deal with a dog hanging off her tail? But no, in terms of sort of other things, she's, I would say, mostly come out of the other end. She will recognise certain things. So towards the end, Cesca's throat almost started to collapse in on itself. So when she was panting, she sounded a little bit like a tractor. It was really heavy, really grumbly. And we've got a few videos where you can hear that on it. And if we're playing it, she's very alert to that noise. So even though it is, I mean, it's almost a year now, which feels crazy, I do think there is still those memories. There's got to be. She recognises it. But aside from that, I think she is pretty much out the other end now. She's so spoiled. I don't think she even realises that she's definitely seeing the perks of being an only dog. She doesn't have time to think about being sad.
But that's what you want, though, isn't it? And it's not like, it's the same with us, where we all experience losing people, pets that we love at some point in life. It's just inevitable. It's the way that it is. And it is a very, very, very tricky time to navigate, and it can last for months and even years and things like that. But I think, and it's not the fact that we forget, it's just the fact that we learn to kind of look at the positives of it, and we don't move on, we just move forward, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. So I think it doesn't mean that we care any less about it. It just means that we can cope better day to day, and we've learned to navigate a new normal. So it is, I'm really happy to hear, obviously I know Blue's doing all right now anyway, because I know Blue, but but it's so good to know, because then it shows that animals, dogs, have this ability to be able to adapt and move on, and that things can change, and that sometimes behavioral issues or changes, they are just short-term things that happen due to an external circumstance, which we can navigate and overcome. So what was the hardest thing of navigating that situation for you as Blue's mum? What was the hardest thing?
Initially, I think it was worry. She wasn't eating, she wasn't drinking. What do I do? Is this the new normal? How do I get her back to, basically, how do I get her to survive? Like, she needs to eat and drink. But that passed quite quickly in the early days. I think the hardest part of it was, we understand death. We understand, that person or that dog or that cat, that pet, any pet has gone, and we can come to terms with it because there's an understanding of it. They don't know what death is. They don't know what's happened. They just know they're not here anymore. So it was very much she was communicating all of our feelings, the crying, the howling, the barking. If I could have sat and cried and howled for days, I probably would have. But it was not being able to help her, not, you can't tell them it's going to be okay, because they don't even know what it's going to be okay means.
No, I know.
I think the hardest part was, reassuring her, and actually she had this massive fear of being alone. So we'd all of a sudden got this almost 3-year-old dog that had never had separation anxiety, that, it happened overnight. She woke up terrified of being alone, and trying to manage that, and having to look into, actually, she's not necessarily scared that we're going to go and not come back. She's just scared of being on her own. So looking at, Instagram and group chats and things were our lifesaver at the time. It was very much have you been through this? Have your dogs been through this? And you do find a lot of your support and guidance from, you can pick little bits from other people's journeys. But definitely the hardest part was, it's the communication when you can see that they're struggling because they don't speak English and they have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
It's totally understandable, because like you say, they don't know how to speak human, and in that kind of situation for humans, that's where social support comes in, isn't it? Where you lean on your family and friends, and you know, they even if sometimes just having somebody in the room with you can take the edge off rather than talking about it and that kind of thing. But it's how do you communicate that to your dog? Because yeah, you can sit in a room with them, but how can you actually, like, I don't know, it's really hard to explain, isn't it? How can you get them to understand that you are there for them? It's just, I can imagine it's so
little
difficult.
Things as well, like, you know, if you're having a good cry, you know, one of the first things that tends to happen is your dog will come and check if you're all right. But then when that dog is struggling, you then don't want to cry even more on the dog. So it was like, oh, I don't know what to do. Am I doing the right thing? Am I being a terrible mum because I'm crying all over her? But
oh yeah,
because then it did pass quite quickly.
Yeah. So how long did it last for then, do you think? How long was she sort of struggling in that kind of phase for?
I would probably say it was a good 6 or 7 weeks altogether, which I say quickly, that is quite a long time when you think you couldn't leave the house without your dog howling. But it slowly got better. And I think, you know, Blue's dog dad played a massive part in that. He'd take her out. He was very good at distracting her. Her training, he sort of upped her training a little bit. So it very much went from, it's quite difficult to train when Cesca's around, because Cesca just saw food or treats and thought it was playtime all the time, where Blue was a bit more brain work for Blue. So I think keeping her mind busy helped massively, taking her outside of the house. It was very easy for us as a family to just want to stay in, not want to do anything. We felt rotten, but actually that wasn't doing Blue any favours at all. We needed to get, you know, a home, as the sense was not where Blue wanted to be. She didn't feel happy there. So very much getting out, going on walks, keeping her mind busy. And I mean, we came to see you at Crufts, and we came back with bags upon bags of toys and treats, and I think that played a massive part. And that's when the spoiled dog syndrome started, I think. We definitely compensate.
I can remember seeing all the pictures, actually. Because it was still very raw at Crufts, wasn't it? It was still very raw.
Yeah, really raw, yeah.
I know. I remember thinking, oh no, Simmone's coming to the stall today. It's going to be, it's going to be, because I don't deal well with public displays of emotion. I really don't. So I was like so scared I was going to see you and just like burst into tears about Cesca, but I can't remember if I did or not. No. Did we manage to keep it together?
I think it was very much like, I think when we were at Crufts, we were introducing ourselves with our dogs' names, weren't we? So it was, if I introduce myself as Blue, is anyone going to know who I am? We're not, you know, at that point we were still Cesca and Blue on Instagram. It was, I go up and say, hi, I'm Blue. Were they going to be like, who? So it was like, I'm Cesca.
and then everyone's just
you were really, I remember your mum just sort of going, oh yeah. I was like, I'm just gonna turn around and focus on Esme. and then Betsy's mum, Betsy Old Town Bulldog, she messaged me a couple of days before and said, oh, we've got you a gift, we'll give it to you at Crufts, make sure you meet us at Cat Stand. And I was thinking, oh my god, I really hope that Lou isn't one of these people that wants you to open the gift in front of her, because it is not going to be pretty. It was very much a thank you, I'll put it in the bag really quick, and then cried when I got home.
I know it is. I know, and it is silly really that we don't really like to let us guard down in public, because again, it's just social support, isn't it? We all feel the same way. We just want to kind of like keep it inside. But yeah, it's so emotional. It's so emotional.
And actually, a lot of my support, I can't speak for my husband and my son, but a lot of my support, I would say, came from that dog community as such. I think there's this little corner of the Instagram world where we are crazy dog parents and they are our life and soul. And I think if I'd have gone to some of my other friends and said, you know, Blue's behaving like this, I don't know what to do, it would have been, well, she's a dog. But there was this group of group of people that just got it, and the ones that didn't get it, you know, they tried to find answers, or they were an inbox away from being just. They were amazing. They definitely got me through it.
Yeah, I think it is. Some people kind of look at you like you're a bit weird when you when you sort of like talk about your dog in such a passionate way. You see, but they're the ones that are weird, right? They're the ones that are weird. It's not us.
100%. It's when I tell people at work that my dog's got an Instagram, they're like, "What? Why? Why not?"
Because it's what we do.
She is my child, and I will show her off.
Yeah, I know, it's lovely. Oh, bless her. So, so it's such kind of like it's such a sad situation to discuss, and it is quite a heavy topic because it does sort of like, you know, it wakes up emotions when you have to kind of go down there and talk about past experiences and thinking about tougher times. But I do think, you know, it is something that we should talk about a lot more, that people should come forward. And like you say, it does kind of put you off wanting to go to friends that aren't dog people because you're not sure how it'll be received, and that can also impact your own healing journey with grief about pet loss. And so if, you know, for people that are struggling with things like this right now, if you don't have any friends that understand, do get yourself over to Instagram and do just, you know, kind of find people to connect with on there. And there are people, millions of people on Instagram whose dogs have an account who will be happy to talk. And we're all as mad as a box of frogs, aren't we? So
yeah, we are.
Definitely recommend joining the community in that respect.
Yeah. And I remember sort of thinking at the time, like, we knew it was coming for those initial days before, and sort of saying to crying, you know, before she'd even gone, crying at the thought of her going. But I don't think you're prepared for the, you know, everybody's lost somebody that they love at some point, but it's very strange. And it's not just, you know, your whole dynamics changes. The house was silent. There was it instantly felt quieter, and it's strange. But I think the biggest comfort, like you said, once you can connect with somebody that gets it or has been through it or is going through something similar, it makes sense a little bit more. I don't think you necessarily understand how you'll feel from the loss of a pet until you lose your pet. It's wow, 10,000 times worse than you can imagine.
And then some.
yeah. And it's, you know, they're every day, aren't they? They're there every day, whether they're in the background or you can hear them getting a drink out of their water bowl. It's little things that you're subconsciously hearing every day that then go. Yeah. And I think it's your whole dynamic changes. So that little crazy corner of frogs on Instagram are definitely good.
I know. I remember that because obviously Betty had problems with her legs, and we had ramps all over the house. She had a ramp to get on the sofa, and she had a ramp to get out the garden because we had steps in the back garden. But we didn't have a ramp on the stairs. Well, because they were just too tall. So I used to pick her up and take her upstairs. And I remember for weeks afterwards, every time I'd turn the lights off downstairs to go upstairs, I'd bend down at the bottom of the stairs to pick her up.
Yeah.
And she wasn't there. And that was one of the hardest things, because it's sort of like I wasn't even thinking about doing it. And it was just autopilot. And then in that instance, it's like, bang, it just hits you all over again, because it's so noticeable in that moment. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things, was getting used to the house again, because there's sort of like an eerie chill in the air, isn't there, you know, when it happens. And it's it definitely does kind of, you can sort of feel the change in the energy, like the frequency, can't you?
100%.
Really, really weird, but yeah.
And I didn't realise before, like, I've got a younger sister, and my parents and grandparents, you know, they'd always call us each other's name, and it'd be like, oh, not that one. But the amount of times I called Blue Cesca, and still sometimes do, like, I'll be sat and I'll say something, and my husband will go, You've just said Cesca, haven't? And you got to get out of that rhythm of shouting both of them. It was like, oh, where's the other one now? it's a new routine. It's strange, very strange.
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard.
Oh,
You can
lovely.
say hello, Bernie. You can say hello.
Oh, Blue's sulking. She's finished whatever she was chewing, and now she's under the table sulking.
Oh, well. So, if there is anything you would say to pet parents who are struggling with the same thing in terms of support, what would that be?
Don't not talk to somebody just because you think they're not going to get it. And if you're not getting the support or the cuddles that you need, head over to Instagram. If you've got a pet account, just put it on your story. You'll be surprised. We had accounts reaching out to us that we'd followed but not really engaged with, or ones that had started following us because of Cesca, and that I would say massively helped. Don't people think, oh God, they're strangers, they're going to think I'm a weirdo if I send this message, but actually, if you pop up in my inbox and say I'm struggling, I won't think that you're a mad frog at all. Just send me a message. I'll gladly talk to you for hours. But it's hard. But don't bottle it up, because that's not healthy in any way. You can reach out to anybody, and I do think there are some. I think it's is it PDSA? Is that who they're called? I think they now have launched a pet grief helpline.
Right, yeah,
something like that. It might not even be PDSA, but just pop it into Google. There'll be all sorts on there. And then we've got a son, and YouTube are full of videos that are helpful. So sometimes your support comes from where you least expect it.
Yeah, that is a lovely bit of support there. So thank you for sharing that. I don't think you could have hit the nail on the head anymore with that, because I think one of the main things is the support following such an emotional experience, both for you and your pet and everybody else in the household. So, it is something that we overlook, and sometimes we might neglect ourselves in taking the steps in order to kind of heal from the experience. So I definitely do recommend joining the box of frogs.
100%. 100%. We're great.
So if any of our listeners would like to contact you for support, would you be happy to lend an ear?
Yes, definitely.
Lovely, jubbly. So if you do want to follow Blue's journey with Simmone, then you can find them on Instagram. I will pop Blue's Instagram handle in the show notes, but for anyone that's listening, it is @_blue_the_GSD. That's right, isn't it?
It's the longest name. We didn't realise until we had to change that Instagram handle from Cesca and Blue to just Blue. There must be about 50 million German Shepherds called Blue.
Really?
That one's taken, that one's taken, that one's taken. Oh my God.
It is, to be fair, it's short if you don't have to say underscore. If you just say Blue the GSD, then it's short, but it is all the underscores. But trust me, in all my experience in dealing with Instagram names, that is not the longest name. When I was doing the live sales, some of the ones that I used to have to type in, I'd just be like, eh? So thank you for that, Simmone. Do you have any plans for the future with Blue regarding your natural journey? Do you have any kind of avenues you want to navigate or anything like that?
So I think now that we have only got Blue and we're not doing a kibble bowl and a raw bowl and everything else in between bowls, our focus is going to be mastering the raw. I think we've done, we've brought the ready-made things and the completes, and we've tried our hand at a little bit of DIY, but making sure that Blue is, I think when you think of a raw diet, you think of, right, they've got a raw meat and that's all they need, but there is so much more that you need to make sure they're getting. So trying to somehow get my head around all of that, which is where I'm going to be leaning on you all the time. But yeah, definitely wanting to make sure that she's getting what she needs as a raw fed dog, but also quality as well. We don't want to just give it up because it's the cheapest thing in the shop, which, do you know what, if that's what you do, there's no shame in it. But we're in a position now where we're a one dog household. We have budgeted for feeding 2 dogs for the past however long, and Blue thrives on a raw diet. Her coat is better, her energy levels. She's just a more pleasant, sassy dog to be around. So my aim is to make sure that she's got the best bowl in town.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. And it sounds to me like you need to attend one of my raw ready workshops. I think that's what you might need. Yeah, so maybe we can start that out. And to be fair, raw feeding, it sounds complicated and it looks complicated, and sometimes it is complicated depending which method you follow. But one of my goals is to make it super simple so that everybody can do it with confidence. So you will have to let me know what you think after the workshop and see if it improves your confidence.
And I think my favourite thing as well about you and your workshops and Be More Dog is it's not judgmental at all. It's, feed the dog in front of you by any means, but actually if you don't know what you're doing, if you're new to it, no judgment, we'll help you. And I need all the help I can get. So
well, I mean, my story. I used to feed pepperonis as treats back in the day. I've been there. I was that person. If that's you right now, that was me 7-8 years ago. We've all been there. There is no shame in it. What matters is that we now learn, and then we do better once we know. So there is no judgment here. Wherever you are on your journey, we can change it. We can change it. That's fine with me. Right. Well, I think that was such a heartfelt episode. I really, really did enjoy that episode, and I think it's sometimes I don't talk about Betty and my experiences enough, and this podcast has really given me a chance to kind of open up about that as well. So I know that we're kind of delving deep into experiences with our guests such as yours, and I love hearing about different perspectives from different people's lives and stuff, but I'm also really loving being able to kind of open up as well with you guys. So I really do appreciate you coming on to talk about such a tough topic. And I know, it's coming up to a year since losing Cesca. So it is still raw, if you ask me. It is still very, very raw. So thank you. Thank you ever so much for coming on, Simmone. And
thank you for having us.
No, it's been such a pleasure. And don't forget, everybody, if you want to reach out to Simmone, then go find them on Instagram. Their handle is in the show notes. And we'll leave it there. Bye. Thanks for listening to another great episode of the My Dog Made Me Do It Naturally podcast. Don't forget to check out the caption for any links discussed here today. And please, if you enjoyed the show, follow along and listen for free on your favourite podcast app. If you have any questions or would like to share your story, feel free to email me at mydogmademedoitnaturally@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Purpose of this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted as advice from a veterinarian or other professional. It does not form a client relationship with me, the host, or any guest speakers, and any information is not intended to and does not diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. And my guests express our own views, thoughts, and opinions as individuals, and the podcast neither endorses or opposes the views, products, or services discussed here. If your pet is ill, always seek advice from your veterinarian. I am not a veterinarian and I do not treat disease or offer medical advice.